I want you to know more about the concept of paths than you may already know from just using them in HTML. I also want you to understand the idea of paths, because it's a very important idea, and it will serve you well not only in this course, not only in HTML, it'll serve you extremely well in XML. You'll be really depending on this idea of paths in XML. And furthermore, I think the idea of paths in general is a really important idea for an information professional to know. Anytime you have hierarchically organized information, lots of examples. Example, the folder structure on your hard drive. Example, the table of contents of a book. Example, the structure of the entire World Wide Web. That's a very hierarchical structure. The structure inside your HTML file, where the root tag is HTML and it has a body tag, and under the body tag is a div tag, under the div tag is a div tag, under the second div tag is a paragraph, etc. Those are all hierarchical structures, where something is a child of something else, where it's an outline structure. We'll talk a lot about hierarchies, but this is your first interaction with them. Anytime you have a hierarchy, you have the issue of how do I say where something is inside that hierarchy. And so, taking the simplest example of a table of contents, I want to tell you where a particular section in this book is. The way I tell you that is, or the way I can tell you that is, it's inside this part, inside this chapter, under this heading, under this subheading, you will find this paragraph. Can you see how I'm walking down through all the levels of the hierarchy and I'm uniquely locating something by its parentage? That's the idea of a path. You locate something by its parentage. Where does it sit? Where is it? What inside of what is it? Inside of HTML, where this really comes up most is in locating files. I have an image. I want to include this image in my web page. I have to say where it is. Well, the image is inside a folder structure. A folder structure is a hierarchical structure, so I have to use some kind of path to say what's the parent structure inside of these folders. Or inside of a CSS, linking a CSS style sheet to a web file. CSS is the CSS file is somewhere on a hard drive, somewhere inside of folders. That's a hierarchical structure, so I have to use a path in order to designate that. Links. A link is an association from the web page I'm currently on to some other web page somewhere, either on my web server or somewhere else on the World Wide Web. Those are all hierarchical structures. I'm going to need a path in order to find my way there. So the main place you use paths inside of HTML is for locating files. Inside of XML, as you'll see, it goes way further than that. We're using paths all the time to locate information inside of our XML file, because an XML file is also a hierarchical structure, so we have to use paths. Okay, so a path, in essence, specifies the parentage of the thing that you want to find. And so how it does that basically is naming all the parents, saying parent 1, and then under parent 1 is child 2, under child 2 is subchild 3, under subchild 3 is subchild 4, etc. And if you follow down through all of those parents, you'll find your right place. Later on, we'll see that there's much more that can be done, much more that can be said, lots of rules to make it much more explicit and to select multiple things, all sorts of things you can do with paths. But for now, let's keep it really simple and focus on the idea of a path and how they work in HTML. It locates a file by talking about all the parents of that file. Okay, so 2 different ways of going about this, talking about the parents. Way number 1, called a relative path, says, well, I'm starting from somewhere, so I just have to talk about the parents between where I am right now, the folder I happen to be in right now, and the folder that I want you to look in to get this file. That's the idea of a relative path. The other idea is the idea of an absolute path, which says, don't worry about where we are now, what folder we happen to be, what folder this web page happens to be in. I'm going to take you from a standard starting place, a standard first parent, and get you from there, because that's reliable. I can always count on that standard first parent. So relative paths, absolute paths. So let's talk about relative paths first. Suppose I'm in some folder on my web file, So when we have a relative path, we have to worry about where we are now. What was the current place that we are? That's called the current folder. And the current folder is really easy to understand in HTML. It's the folder that contains the web page that contains the path. So I have a folder called X, and inside that folder called X is a file called y.html. Inside y.html is a link, and that link says z.html. No path at all, just z.html. How should I find z.html? z.html is a file on the internet somewhere, and I have to find it. Well, it's easy enough to say that, well, since I'm in this folder already, and I'm in x.html and I want to go to y.html, I'm probably going to look in the same folder because no one said anything about any kind of parents. So that's the simplest kind of relative path. It's the one where I'm in the directory already, I'm in the folder already that contains the target, so don't go anywhere, just look in the same folder that you're in already. The page that you're in, the folder that that page is in, defines the current folder, and you can always find other files relative to that. And the simplest way is I'm in the same folder, so no need to specify parentage at all. The next most simple way is, well, the file that you're looking for is in a subfolder of this one. So I'm in the I forget what letters I'm using, so I'll start again. I'm in folder X, and my file is in folder X, and my images are in an image subdirectory under folder X, and I want to find a picture called picture.jpg. It's in the images folder, and it happens to be under the folder that I'm in right now. Then I use a relative path. I just say images / the name of the page. What I've done there is I've named all the parents between where I am right now and where I want you to be to find this file. The file is in a child of the current folder, so all I have to do is name that subfolder, and then we'll climb down into that subfolder and retrieve the children. Okay, that's a relative path. There's other things that you can do, like you can go upwards in the hierarchy. We'll deal with all that later. I want to just think of it simply right now. A relative path assumes that you're already in the current folder. The current folder is defined as the current HTML page, the folder that the current HTML page is in, and when I'm looking for an image in that HTML file, I can go down subdirectory to find that image. Okay, now let's talk about absolute paths. Relative paths assume you are somewhere and work from the somewhere you are, the folder you're in, to the folder you want to be in. An absolute path, on the other hand, takes you from a known starting place. And in HTML, the usual known starting place is the root of the HTML website. Your website is in a set of folders on some server somewhere, and there's a root folder, just like there's a root element of the HTML file. And in that root folder is the rest of your website. So if I start my path with the / character, that's just a convention we use, start the path with the / character, and that says begin from the root of the website. So if the image that I'm looking for is in the images folder that's under the root of the website, that's all the way at the beginning of the website, not relative to the folder that I happen to be in, but at the root of the website, I'll have a path that says / images picture.jpg. That tells the browser to always go to the root of the website, it tells the server to go to the root of the website, look for one subdirectory called images.jpg, called images, look in that folder, and you should find a picture called picture.jpg. One more kind of absolute path that I want to talk about is the very most absolute path on the web, and that says my file that I want to find is just somewhere on the web, and it's on some website under some set of folders. And to do that, it's a very simple matter. I just prepend the URL for the website before I start talking about which folders on the website I'm going to. So it's mysite.com, then /, meaning go to the root of that website, then images, then picture.jpg. Okay, so this idea of paths is a very important one. I've made it more complicated, probably seeming than you've wanted it to be just for HTML, but the reason is because we're going to use all of these sophisticated notions of paths later on. So we have a relative path that says start from where you are and then just specify the parentage to get to where you want to be. And we have an absolute path that says I'm going to start from a known place and then work my way down through all the children until I get to the folder that I want. Two kinds of absolute paths we use. One is absolute to the website, and that's you start your path with the /. The other one is absolute to the entire web. We start with http:// name of the website, then /, then all the children folders all the way down to the one that I'm looking for.